Back when racetracks still built legends, Suzuki wasn't content to make a fast motorcycle. They built a rebel. The RG500 Gamma wasn't born to follow rules. It was made to shatter them. A Grand Prix heart beating inside a street-legal shell. With mirrors, a headlight, and an unspoken warning attached. In an era where speed was worshipped, Suzuki did the unthinkable. They unleashed a true race machine into everyday traffic. No detuning, no apologies. Just raw, unfiltered performance wrapped in a license plate. It wasn't just a motorcycle. It was a statement, a metal manifesto that screamed down the block like it still belonged on the starting grid. And to regulators, it was a menace. This is the shocking truth behind the Suzuki RG500 Gamma, the outlaw superbike banned from showrooms, chased off the streets, yet never forgotten by those who dared to ride it. The RG500 wasn't born in a showroom. It was forged in battle on the blood-slick asphalt of 1970s Grand Prix racing. This was an era where finishing a race was a victory in itself, and winning meant surviving what the track threw at you. At 170 miles per hour, with barely a whisper of traction and no electronic safety nets in sight. And in the middle of this madness, Suzuki dropped a bombshell, the RG500. At a time when European factories dominated the podium, this bike didn't just compete, it conquered. Under the hands of British legend Barry Sheene, the RG500 stormed to back-to-back World Championship titles in 1976 and 1977, putting Suzuki squarely at the top of the racing world. What made it special? At the heart of the machine was a true engineering oddity, a 497 cubic centimeter square 4 two-stroke engine. Think of it as two parallel twin engines fused together, each with its own crankshaft, working in perfect mechanical chaos. The result? 123 horsepower crammed into a compact chassis that weighed just over 340 pounds. This thing didn't just go fast. It launched like a missile on two wheels. Riders didn't ease into the RG500. They held on. The power delivery was brutal, the response immediate, and the sound, pure mechanical violence. It didn't whisper performance, it screamed it. But for Suzuki, this wasn't just about race wins. It was about making a statement. They weren't content with playing catch-up. The RG500 was their way of saying, we belong here, at the front, and we didn't get here by accident. They proved they could build a machine to take on the world's best and win. But what came next was even crazier. Suzuki wasn't done. They had a question on their minds that no one had dared ask before. What if we let this beast loose on the streets? Inside the factory walls, a new idea began to take shape, one that was equal parts brilliant and insane. What if the RG500 didn't have to stay locked behind pit walls and paddocks? What if, just maybe, they could let it run wild, on the street? That wasn't something manufacturers did. Race bikes were for racers. Street bikes were toned down, softened, civilized. But Suzuki didn't want to build a tribute. They wanted to put the real thing in your garage, with turn signals, a license plate, and just enough compromise to keep it technically legal. And in 1985, they did it. They called it the RG500 Gamma. But don't let the paperwork fool you. This wasn't some tamed-down replica. It was still a beast, just one wearing a street jacket. Under the bodywork, it kept the same square 4, two-stroke, 497 cubic centimeter engine architecture, but tuned slightly for public roads. Output dropped from 123 to about 95 horsepower, Torque eased to 45 pound-feet, but the attitude? Still pure racer, still explosive. The Gamma featured an aluminum twin-spar frame, lifted straight from racing DNA. It weighed around 340 pounds, and every ounce of it felt alive. The riding position was aggressive, the throttle razor-sharp, and the sound, well, the sound was unmistakable. A high-pitched mechanical snarl that echoed the grandstands. To the casual eye, it may have looked like a sport bike with mirrors and a headlight, but anyone who twisted that throttle knew the truth. This wasn't a street bike pretending to be fast. It was a race bike pretending to behave. And the streets weren't ready. Because when you opened up a Gamma, you weren't just riding, you were time traveling. Back to a time when bikes were raw, riders were fearless, and manufacturers still had the guts to build something this wild and let regular people take it home. If you'd never ridden a two-stroke before, the Gamma didn't ease you in. It punched you in the chest. Under 6,000 RPM, it felt tame, almost polite. The throttle response was soft, the power manageable. But twisted past that threshold, and it was like lighting a fuse. The engine didn't accelerate, it detonated. That 497 cubic centimeter square 4 stroke came alive with a violent surge of power that hit all at once. No build-up, no warning. The rear tire scrambled for grip, the front wheel clawed skyward, and suddenly your heart rate was trying to catch up with the tack needle. This wasn't like riding a 4-stroke. There was no gradual swell of torque, no smooth wave of power. The Gamma was all or nothing, explosive, twitchy, and utterly alive. And that's what made it unforgettable. With a top speed around 145 miles per hour, the RG500 Gamma stood toe-to-toe with the fastest motorcycles of its era. But raw numbers were only part of the story. What really defined the Gamma was how it delivered that speed. It didn't glide, it lunged, it bucked, it bit back, and yet for riders who understood the rhythm of a 2-stroke, that wild personality was the reward. The sudden rush past redline, the scream of the chambers, the way it snapped upright the second you rolled off throttle. It was unpredictable, but in a way that dared you to master it. Every ride felt like a test, not just of the bike, but of the rider. The Gamma didn't flatter you, it challenged you. It forced you to pay attention, to commit, to earn its respect. For those who grew up on smooth, predictable 4 strokes, the Gamma was a revelation. It wasn't designed to keep you safe. It was designed to remind you what motorcycles once were. Raw, mechanical, and completely unfiltered. And once you felt it, truly felt it, you never looked at a modern sport bike the same way again. For all its glory, the RG500 Gamma came with a cost, and it didn't come cheap. This wasn't a bike you just rode. It was one you worked for. Every ride was a gamble between joy and mechanical meltdown. At the center of it all was that exotic square 4 engine, a masterpiece on paper, but a handful in the real world. Built with 2 crankshafts, geared together in tight synchronization, it produced incredible power and incredible stress. Run it too hard, too often, and things started to fail. Crankshafts cracked, pistons wore quickly, spark plugs fouled out, especially during slow-speed city riding. A day in stop-and-go traffic could leave you stranded with a dead cylinder, and maybe a long walk home. And then there was the cooling system, barely adequate for the beast it was trying to tame. Hot summer rides, risky, idling at a red light, dangerous. The Gamma liked to move, it hated to wait. The clutch wore fast, especially under aggressive launches. The gearbox, while precise when new, could grow notchy and stiff without meticulous care. Add in an electrical system that was prone to mysterious gremlins, and you had a machine that demanded constant attention and the hands of a mechanic who actually knew what he was doing. Good luck finding one. Replacement parts? Scarce, expensive, sometimes impossible. Owners often became part-time restorers, scouring forums and salvage yards for discontinued pieces. The brakes faded under hard use. The narrow tires, designed for cornering agility, meant rough pavement felt like turbulence in a fighter jet. And when you twisted that throttle wide open, the Gamma drank fuel and two-stroke oil like it was free. Spoiler, it wasn't. But for those who understood it, the Gamma's flaws weren't deal-breakers. They were the price of admission. Because no modern bike, no matter how refined, could replicate what this two-stroke lunatic gave you in return. It was fragile, it was demanding, but when it was right, it was magic. In the end, the RG500 Gamma wasn't defeated on the road. It was outlawed in boardrooms and buried by bureaucracy. It didn't crash and burn. It was choked out by a world that no longer had room for machines this wild. As the 1980s rolled into the 90s, the winds began to shift. Across Europe and North America, emissions regulations tightened, noise limits dropped, public concern over pollution and safety hit the motorcycle world like a hammer, and the two-stroke engine became public enemy number one. The Gamma, with its oil-burning two-stroke roar and raw personality, didn't stand a chance. It was too loud, too dirty, too dangerous. Insurance companies took notice. Premiums skyrocketed. In some regions, policies were denied altogether. Dealers, once proud to showcase the Gamma, were quietly told to pull it off the floor. And though Suzuki never admitted it publicly, the writing was on the wall. Despite strong demand from riders who craved something pure, the Gamma couldn't survive in a world full of red tape and regulations. Production ended in 1987, after just a few short years. Not because it was a bad bike, not because it didn't sell, but because the world had changed, and it had no idea what to do with a street-legal missile on two wheels. The RG500 Gamma wasn't discontinued. It was erased. It had become a symbol of a bygone era. A machine too fast, too sharp, too free for a society suddenly obsessed with control. But here's the thing. Legends don't die quietly. Even as the Gamma disappeared from showrooms, its reputation only grew louder. It became a whisper passed among enthusiasts, a story told in hushed tones at track days, a name spoken with a mix of awe and regret, because deep down, every rider who knew what it was knew exactly why it had to be stopped. It was just too good to be allowed to exist. Built for just 3 short years between 1985 and 1987, the Gamma was rare from day one. Production numbers were low, demand was high, and most of the bikes that hit the streets were ridden hard, thrashed, crashed, tuned, raced, and rebuilt until there wasn't much left of the original machine. Finding a clean, unmolested Gamma today is like hunting for treasure. The few that remain, carefully stored, painstakingly maintained, have become collector's gold. Prices have skyrocketed, with pristine examples fetching tens of thousands of dollars at auction. But for the lucky few who own one, that price tag comes with a question that never gets easier. Do you ride it or preserve it? Do you let the engine scream again, or let it sit, quiet, clean, untouched, like a piece of mechanical art behind glass? Because the Gamma is no longer just a motorcycle, it's a time capsule, a snapshot of an era when motorcycles were allowed to be wild, unruly, and dangerous. It's not about convenience or comfort or emissions, It's about attitude, about risk, about building something simply because it could be done, and letting the rider decide if they were brave enough to handle it. In a world now dominated by rider aids, engine maps, and ride-by-wire restraint, the Gamma stands as a final chapter of mechanical honesty. No filters, no forgiveness. And that's why it's more than rare, it's revered. Because once you've seen a Gamma, once you've heard it, or had the privilege to ride one, you don't forget it. You remember it the way we remember all legends, not because they lasted forever, but because for one brief, glorious moment, they burned brighter than anything else. The RG500 Gamma wasn't just a fast bike. It was a bold declaration from a time when engineering answered to passion, not paperwork. It came, it roared, and it rattled a world that wasn't ready to let something so pure run free. But what if it came back? Would you have the nerve to ride it? Tell us in the comments. Would you dare take the Gamma on the open road? Or would you lock it away like a museum piece? If this story brought back memories or lit a new fire, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell, because out there, tucked away in barns, sheds, and forgotten corners of history, are more machines like this one. And we'll be here, ready to tell their stories, one legend at a time.